What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a talk show stage expecting respect, but instead gets blindsided by a host who thinks ratings matter more than decency? It only took 33 seconds of Kelly Clarkson dismissing Denzel Washington's life work for one of the most respected actors in history to do something nobody saw coming. He stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and walked off her set. But what led to this shocking moment? The answer is more disturbing than you think. The day started like any other taping of The Kelly Clarkson Show. Crew members rushed around the studio. Cameras were being positioned. The audience filed into their seats, buzzing with excitement. Everyone knew who was coming: Denzel Washington, two-time Academy Award winner, a man whose name alone commanded respect. He had built a career spanning decades on integrity, talent, and raw dedication to his craft. This was supposed to be a celebration of his latest film, a passion project he had spent years developing. Instead, it became a masterclass in disrespect. Kelly Clarkson bounced onto the stage with her usual high-energy entrance. The crowd erupted. She waved, smiled, and launched into her opening monologue. She talked about her weekend, cracked a few jokes, and then casually mentioned her guest. But there was something off about her tone, something dismissive. Like this interview was just another checkbox on her daily schedule. Like Denzel Washington was just another celebrity passing through. When Denzel walked out, the audience stood and applauded. He moved with that quiet confidence he was known for. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, he carried himself like someone who had earned every ounce of his success. He shook Kelly's hand, settled into the guest chair, and waited for the conversation to begin. The applause died down. The cameras focused in, and that is when things started to unravel. Kelly did not ease into the conversation. She did not ask about his career, his process, or what inspired him. Instead, she immediately went for what she probably thought was a clever angle. She leaned back in her chair, tilted her head, and said something that made the entire studio freeze. She said, "So, Denzel, I gotta be honest. I watched your new movie last night, and I'm just wondering, why do you keep making these serious, heavy films? Don't you think audiences are tired of all that doom and gloom?" The audience went silent. You could feel the tension crawl across the room. Denzel's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He took a breath, composed himself, and responded with grace. He said, "Well, Kelly, I make films that matter to me, films that tell stories about real people facing real struggles. That's what I've always done. That's what I'll continue to do." It was a measured response, professional, respectful, but Kelly did not pick up on the warning signs. She did not read the room. Instead, she doubled down. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "I mean, come on, nobody wants to leave a theater feeling depressed. Why not do something fun for once? A comedy? A rom-com? Something that doesn't make people want to slit their wrists?" The audience gasped. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few crew members exchanged worried glances. This was not playful banter. This was a host diminishing a guest's entire body of work on live television, and she had just made a wildly inappropriate joke about suicide while doing it. Denzel's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests, gripped them slightly. He was holding back, trying to remain composed, but you could see the fire building behind his eyes. He leaned forward slightly and said, "Kelly, the work I do is not about making people depressed. It's about making them think. It's about shining a light on issues that matter. Social justice, inequality, the human condition. These are not light topics, but they are important topics. And I would hope that someone in your position would understand that." His tone was firm but controlled. He was giving her an out, a chance to pivot, to acknowledge the weight of what he did and move the conversation forward. But Kelly missed it completely. She waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, please, it's just entertainment. You're not curing cancer here. You're making movies. Let's not act like you're saving the world." The words hung in the air like poison. You could see the exact moment something shifted in Denzel. His expression hardened. His posture straightened. He looked at Kelly with a mix of disappointment and disbelief. This was not just disrespect. This was belittling. This was a talk show host who had clearly forgotten who she was speaking to. Or worse, she knew exactly who he was and simply did not care. Denzel took a long breath. He placed his hands on his knees and spoke slowly, deliberately. He said, "Kelly, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've worked with some of the greatest directors, actors, and writers in the history of cinema. I've told stories that have moved people, changed perspectives, and yes, made them uncomfortable. Because that's what art does. It challenges you. It makes you think. It holds up a mirror to society and asks, are we doing better? Can we do better? That is not just entertainment. That is purpose. That is legacy. His words carried weight, authority, dignity. The audience was completely captivated. Some people nodded in agreement. Others sat frozen, waiting to see how Kelly would respond. But instead of backing down, instead of showing an ounce of humility, Kelly smirked. She actually smirked, and then she said the words that would end the interview forever. She said, "Wow, okay. So you're one of those actors who takes himself way too seriously. Got it. Listen, I sing for a living. I don't pretend like I'm changing the world. I entertain people. I make them smile. Maybe you should. Try it sometime instead of lecturing everyone about social justice or whatever." The audience did not know how to react. A few people clapped awkwardly, probably out of confusion. Most sat in stunned silence. The camera operators kept rolling, capturing every excruciating second. And Denzel, for the first time since sitting down, looked genuinely angry. Not loud, explosive anger. The quiet, simmering kind. The kind that comes from a deep well of disappointment. He stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "You know what, Kelly? I came here today to talk about a film I poured my heart into. A film that addresses police brutality, systemic racism, and the struggles of black families in America. I came here because I thought this would be a platform to have a real conversation. But clearly, you're not interested in that. You're interested in sound bites and cheap laughs. So let me save us both some time." He stood up. Slowly, deliberately. The entire studio fell silent. Kelly's smirk faded. Suddenly, she realized this was not going according to plan. She stammered, "Wait, what are you doing?" "Denzel, come on, sit down. We're just having a conversation." Denzel looked down at her. His voice was calm but ice cold. He said, "No, Kelly, a conversation requires mutual respect, and you have shown me none. You dismissed my work. You trivialized the issues I care about. And you did it all with a smile on your face like it was some kind of joke. I don't need to sit here and be insulted. I've earned the right to walk away from disrespect." And that's exactly what I'm doing. Kelly's face went pale. She tried to recover, reaching out toward him as if to stop him. She said, "Denzel, wait. I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to be funny. Come on, don't be so sensitive." He turned back to her, his expression cold and unwavering. He said, "Sensitive? Kelly, there is a difference between being sensitive and demanding respect. I have given this industry everything. I have worked harder than most people will ever work in their entire lives. I have used my platform to uplift voices that need to be heard. And I will not sit here and let you reduce that to nothing. You want to be funny? Be funny, but not at the expense of someone's legacy, not at the expense of the issues that actually matter." He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or stay silent. Kelly scrambled to salvage the situation. She stood up, her voice cracking slightly as she called out, "Denzel, please, let's just start over." "I'm sorry if I offended you." But it was too late. Denzel did not turn around. He did not acknowledge her. He simply kept walking. His publicist, who had been standing off to the side, quickly moved to follow him. The studio doors opened, and Denzel Washington walked out of the Kelly Clarkson show. The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent studio. Kelly stood there, visibly shaken. She looked at the cameras, then at the audience, then back at the empty chair where Denzel had been sitting. For the first time since the interview started, she seemed to realize the gravity of what had just happened. She tried to laugh it off, saying, "Well, that was unexpected. We'll be right back after this break." But her voice lacked conviction. The energy had completely drained from the room. Crew members whispered to each other. Producers scrambled behind the scenes. The audience members looked at each other in shock, murmuring about what they had just witnessed. This was not a planned segment. This was not a publicity stunt. This was a real, unscripted moment where a host had pushed too far and paid the price. Let's rewind and break down exactly how this spiraled out of control. Because this was not just one comment that set Denzel off. This was a series of missteps, dismissals, and outright insults that built up until he had no choice but to leave. It started the moment Kelly opened her mouth. Instead of welcoming him with the reverence he deserved, she treated him like a prop. someone there to boost her ratings, someone whose decades of work could be boiled down to a punchline. When she asked him why he kept making serious films, she was not asking out of genuine curiosity. She was setting him up. She wanted him to defend himself so she could swoop in with a quippy comeback. It was a tactic, a game. But Denzel was not playing. He answered honestly, thoughtfully, and with the kind of depth that comes from someone who truly cares about his craft. And Kelly responded by mocking him. Her comment about audiences wanting to slit their wrists was not just tasteless, it was cruel. It took the serious, meaningful work Denzel had spent his life creating and reduced it to something depressing and worthless. She laughed while saying it. Like the idea of someone making art that challenges people was funny to her. Like discomfort was something to be avoided at all costs. And when Denzel tried to explain the importance of what he did, she cut him down again. Telling him he was not curing cancer, that he was just making movies, was the breaking point. Because Denzel knew his work mattered. He had seen it. He had received letters from people whose lives were changed by his films, people who saw themselves represented on screen for the first time, people who felt heard, seen, and understood because of the stories he chose to tell. And here was Kelly Clarkson, sitting in her comfortable talk show chair, telling him it was all meaningless. But what made it worse was the arrogance, the entitlement. Kelly was not just dismissing Denzel's work, she was positioning herself as somehow above it. As if her brand of entertainment, singing covers, and chatting with celebrities was more valid than his decades of groundbreaking performances. She acted like he was being pretentious for caring about his art, like he should lighten up and stop taking himself so seriously. It was insulting on every level. And then came the final straw. When she told him he took himself too seriously, when she said he should stop lecturing people about social justice, that was it. Because Denzel was not lecturing anyone. He was simply explaining why his work mattered, why the stories he told were important, why representation, truth, and uncomfortable conversations were necessary. And Kelly dismissed all of it with a wave of her hand and a condescending tone. So when Denzel stood up and walked out, he was not being dramatic. He was not throwing a tantrum. He was making a statement. He was saying, "I will not tolerate this. I will not sit here and smile while you tear down everything I have built. I have earned the right to be treated with respect, and if you cannot give me that, then I am leaving." And that is exactly what he did. The moment he walked out those studio doors, the dynamic shifted. Kelly was no longer in control. She had lost the narrative. She had pushed a legend too far, and now she was left standing in front of a silent audience, trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. Her apology, if you could even call it that, was weak, hollow. She said she was sorry if she offended him. As if there was any question about whether her words were offensive. Denzel did not owe her a second chance. He did not owe her an explanation. He had already given her multiple opportunities to course correct, and she had ignored every single one, so he left. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that respect is not negotiable, that no amount of fame, no platform, no audience gives anyone the right to belittle someone else's life work. Think about the courage it took to do that. Denzel was on a major talk show. Cameras were rolling. Millions of people would eventually see this. Walking out was not the easy choice. Staying, smiling, and playing along would have been easier. But Denzel did not build his career on taking the easy road. He built it on integrity, on standing up for what he believed in. And in that moment, what he believed in was his right to be treated with dignity. Kelly tried to spin it. She tried to make it seem like Denzel was overreacting, like he could not take a joke. But anyone who watched that interview knew the truth. She had crossed a line. She had been dismissive, condescending, and outright disrespectful. And when Denzel called her out on it, she doubled down. Instead of apologizing, she made it worse. And by the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. The audience sat there in stunned silence as the cameras cut to commercial. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew how to process what they had just seen. Because this was not scripted drama. This was real. This was a moment where the facade of Hollywood niceness cracked wide open, and people saw what happened when arrogance met integrity. When entitlement met self-respect. When someone who thought they could get away with anything ran into someone who refused to tolerate it. Denzel Washington did not need the Kelly Clarkson show. He did not need the exposure. He did not need the platform. He was Denzel Washington, a living legend, a two-time Oscar winner, a man whose body of work spoke for itself. Kelly, on the other hand, needed him. She needed the credibility that came with having someone of his stature on her show. She needed the audience that would tune in to see him, and she squandered it. She treated him like he was disposable, like his presence was not a privilege but an obligation. And when he left, she was forced to confront that reality. The show went on, of course. They brought out another guest. They played some games. They pretended like nothing had happened, but everyone knew. Everyone in that studio, everyone watching at home, everyone who would later see the clips online, they all knew. Kelly Clarkson had disrespected one of the greatest actors of all time, and he had walked out on her. That was the story. That was what people would remember. Let's talk about the bigger picture here. Because this was not just about one bad interview. This was about a pattern. A pattern of talk show hosts treating their guests like commodities, like interchangeable parts in a machine designed to generate content and boost ratings. Denzel was not the first person to be disrespected on a talk show, and he would not be the last. But he was one of the few who had the courage to stand up and say, "Enough." Think about how many times you have seen a guest sit through an uncomfortable interview, smile politely, and play along even when the host was being rude or inappropriate. It happens all the time. Because there is this unspoken rule in Hollywood that you do not make waves. You do not rock the boat. You show up, you promote your project, and you leave. But Denzel rejected that rule. He said, "I am not going to sit here and pretend this is okay. I am not going to let you disrespect me just because it is easier to stay quiet." That takes guts. It takes conviction. And it takes a level of self-respect that a lot of people do not have. Denzel had nothing to prove. He had already proven everything. He had the awards, the accolades, the respect of his peers, but he still refused to let someone diminish him because it was not about protecting his ego. It was about protecting his legacy. It was about standing up for the work he had done and the principles he believed in. And Kelly? Kelly learned a hard lesson that day. She learned that not everyone will tolerate being treated poorly. She learned that there are consequences for arrogance. She learned that respect is not something you can take for granted, especially when you are sitting across from someone who has earned it tenfold. Whether she internalized that lesson or not, only time would tell. But in that moment, standing alone on that stage, she had to face the reality of what she had done. The interview that was supposed to be a highlight of her show became its biggest embarrassment. The guest who was supposed to boost her ratings walked out and made her look small. And all of it could have been avoided if she had just shown a little respect. If she had approached the conversation with humility instead of arrogance. If she had listened to Denzel instead of talking over him. If she had recognized that his work mattered, that his perspective mattered, that he mattered. But she did not do any of those things. She made joke after joke, dismissal after dismissal, until Denzel had no choice but to leave. And when he did it with grace. He did not yell. He did not insult her. He simply stated his case, stood up, and walked away. That is the mark of someone who knows their worth. Someone who does not need to prove anything to anyone. Someone who understands that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove yourself from a situation that does not serve you. The cameras captured every second of it. The silence, the shock, the slow, deliberate way Denzel moved toward the exit, the desperation in Kelly's voice as she tried to get him to stay, the heavy thud of the studio doors closing behind him. It was television gold, but not in the way anyone had planned. It was raw. It was real. It was a reminder that even in the controlled environment of a talk show, things can go off script. People can surprise you. And sometimes those surprises reveal more truth than any scripted segment ever could. Denzel Washington walked off the Kelly Clarkson show because he refused to be disrespected. He walked off because he valued his integrity more than his appearance on a daytime talk show. He walked off because he understood that some things are more important than playing nice. And in doing so, he sent a message, not just to Kelly, but to everyone watching. The message was simple. Know your worth, demand, respect. And when someone refuses to give it to you, do not be afraid to walk away. That is the story of how one of Hollywood's most respected actors got kicked off a talk show. Except he was not kicked off. He left, on his own terms, with his head held high. And while Kelly Clarkson was left scrambling to explain what had just happened, Denzel Washington was already out the door, moving on to the next thing, unbothered and unshaken. Because that is what legends do. They do not waste time on people who do not respect them. They simply walk away. What made this moment so powerful was not just the act of leaving, it was everything that led up to it. It was the accumulation of disrespect that finally reached a breaking point. Because Denzel did not walk in looking for a fight, he walked in ready to have a professional conversation. He had prepared talking points about his film. He had stories to share about the production process, the cast, the message he wanted to convey. He came ready to engage. But Kelly was not interested in engagement. She was interested in entertainment, her version of entertainment, the kind that prioritized quick laughs over meaningful dialogue. From the very beginning, Kelly set a tone that was casual to the point of being careless. She did not prepare thoughtful questions. She did not research his latest project beyond a surface-level watch. She treated the interview like a box to check rather than an opportunity to have a real conversation with someone whose career had shaped modern cinema. And Denzel noticed. You could see it in his body language. The way he sat a little straighter when she made that first dismissive comment. The way his smile faded when she laughed at his response. The way his eyes hardened when she kept pushing. What Kelly failed to understand was that Denzel had been in this industry long enough to recognize disrespect when he saw it. He had sat through countless interviews. He had dealt with journalists who asked tough questions, critics who challenged his choices, and hosts who tried to get a rise out of him. But there was always a baseline level of respect, an understanding that even if they disagreed, even if the conversation got heated, they were still treating each other as professionals. Kelly crossed that line. She did not just disagree with his artistic choices, she mocked them, she belittled them. She acted like his entire career was some kind of pretentious joke. And the worst part? She seemed genuinely confused when he called her out on it. Like she could not fathom why he would be offended. Like her comments were harmless fun, and he was being uptight for taking them seriously. That disconnect, that inability to recognize the weight of her words, made everything worse. Because it meant she was not just being disrespectful, she was being disrespectful and oblivious. She genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong, that her position as a host gave her the right to say whatever she wanted without consequence. Denzel tried to educate her. He tried to explain why his work mattered, why telling stories about social issues was not depressing, it was necessary, why making people uncomfortable was something